My name's Alex Rivera, and what happened to me still feels impossible. I bought a car, nothing special, just a way to get to work and back. But if you listen to this story until the end, you'll see how a simple drive can change everything. I bought a used car on a gray Tuesday, the kind of day that feels like it forgot how to shine. 4 days later, that car's GPS took me to a place that rewired my entire life. The car itself wasn't special. A 2018 Mazda 3, 65,000 miles, a few scratches, nothing dramatic. I didn't buy it because I wanted adventure. I bought it because I needed to get to a job I hated and back to an apartment that never felt like home. But the GPS had a single saved address labeled home. And curiosity, that tiny whisper that ruins all logic, told me to follow it. I wasn't the adventurous type. I was the kind who double-checks locks and eats the same frozen dinner 3 nights in a row. Still, something about that address got stuck in my head. Who's home? Why there? I told myself it was nothing. But Saturday came, and boredom can look a lot like bravery when you've got nothing to lose. So I started driving. The first 20 minutes felt ordinary, just traffic lights and radio commercials. But soon the roads narrowed, the city vanished behind me, and pine trees began to crowd the edges of the highway. The air grew thinner, cleaner. My GPS said, "Continue for 54 miles. "Sure," I muttered. "Why not?" I didn't realize yet that I wasn't driving toward a destination. I was driving toward meaning. 2 years earlier, I'd dropped out of grad school halfway through a master's in literature. I told everyone it was for personal reasons. The truth? I couldn't stand another seminar where we dissected poetry while pretending life itself wasn't bleeding outside. So I quit. Since then, I'd been working customer support for a cable company, listening to strangers yell about their Wi-Fi as if it were the center of their universe. $17 an hour, and I spent most of it on rent for a studio apartment that smelled like loneliness. My friends moved on, marriages, babies, promotions. My feed was a highlight reel of everyone else's joy. And I was background noise in my own story. When my old Toyota finally died, I didn't mourn it. I just needed wheels, any wheels. That's how I met the salesman, a tired guy in his 50s named Larry, whose enthusiasm had probably expired around 2008. He showed me the Carfax, said the usual lines about "great deal" and "previous owner took good care of it." Estate sale, he mentioned casually. Owner passed away. Family sold it off. I nodded, signed, paid, drove away. Another meaningless transaction between two people who didn't really want to be there. Friday evening, after another soul-sucking shift, I sat in the new car, staring at the steering wheel like it owed me purpose. I turned on the Bluetooth setup, and that's when I saw it, the saved GPS address. Just one. Home. I almost deleted it. Almost. But that little word tugged at me. Who's home? Where? Why leave it saved? I shrugged, whispered, "Fine. Let's see where home is," and hit navigate. Saturday morning, the sky was silver and half asleep, and so was I. I grabbed a gas station coffee, turned on the car, and followed the robotic voice. Head north. The miles rolled by like pages I didn't know I needed to read. City faded into hills, hills into forests, forests into silence. After nearly 2 hours, the GPS chimed, "You have arrived at your destination." I pulled into a small gravel lot carved into the side of a mountain. There was nothing, no houses, no signs, just a wooden overlook platform, a single bench, and an endless view of valleys that looked like they were holding their breath. And on that bench, an old man sat waiting. He wore a plaid jacket despite the mild weather, silver hair brushing his collar, eyes fixed on the horizon. I hesitated, unsure whether to say something. Maybe he was just another tourist. But as I stepped out of the car, he turned, looked straight at me, and smiled like he'd been expecting me. "You came," he said simply. His voice was rough but kind, like gravel over velvet. Yeah. I guess." He nodded toward the car. That's Michael's car, isn't it? Sorry, whose? My son's, he said. He died 8 months ago. The words hit like cold water. I didn't know. I bought it from a dealer. It's all right, the man said softly. That's how it was supposed to happen. He extended his hand. Walter Green. Alex Rivera, I said, shaking it. Walter pointed at the bench. Come on, sit. You've come a long way. I hesitated, but curiosity, same thing that had dragged me here, pushed me forward. He looked back at the valley. Michael used to bring me here. Said it was the only place that made him feel infinite. We sat in silence for a long minute. The wind carried the scent of pine and memory. Walter finally said, he saved that address on the GPS, told me that one day, someone would be curious enough to follow it. He wanted me to be here when they did. I turned toward him. Why? He smiled sadly. Because he believed the universe connects people for a reason. He said whoever came would be someone looking for something, even if they didn't know what. I stared at the horizon, feeling something tighten in my chest. Maybe he was right. Because I had no idea what I was looking for. Only that, somehow, I'd started to find it. Walter kept his eyes on the horizon as he spoke, his voice slow and deliberate, like each word carried a small memory. Michael was 32 when he passed, he began. Cancer. Lungs. Never smoked a day in his life, but sometimes life doesn't care about fairness. I said nothing. The wind filled the silence for us. He fought hard for a year, Walter continued. Tried every treatment, every experiment. But the cancer moved faster than we could. He paused. We used to come up here all the time long before the illness. He called it our place. He pointed at the valley below. We scattered his mother's ashes there when Michael was 12. After that, it became tradition. Graduations, birthdays, heartbreaks, we always ended up here. Just the two of us, waiting for the sun to remind us that endings can still be beautiful. I swallowed, my throat tight. Walter's voice trembled but didn't break. When the doctor said he didn't have much time left, I asked him what he wanted. He said, one more sunset at the overlook. He turned toward me then. He never made it. Too weak near the end. I could feel the weight of his grief like it was sitting between us. But before he passed, Walter said, he did something strange. He told me he'd saved this GPS address in the car and labeled it home. He said, Dad, whoever buys the car next, if they're the right kind of person, they'll be curious enough to follow it. Wait for them. I blinked. He said that? Walter nodded. He believed people cross paths for reasons we can't see. He thought whoever came would be searching for something they didn't even know they'd lost. We both stared out at the distance where the clouds met the earth. I thought about deleting it, I admitted quietly. The GPS address. But something told me not to. Walter smiled faintly. That's what he was counting on. We sat for a while without speaking. There was a strange peace between us, like the silence itself had purpose. Finally, he asked, so tell me, Alex. Why do you follow it? I laughed softly, though it sounded hollow. Because I didn't have anything better to do. I hate my job. Dropped out of grad school. Haven't figured out what I'm doing with my life. Guess I just wanted something. Walter nodded, as if the confession didn't surprise him. You're lost, he said gently. I guess so. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Michael was lost once too. After college, he took a business job because it sounded safe. Hated every second of it. Then, one day, he bought a cheap camera and started taking photos on weekends. Landscapes, streets, strangers. He said it was the first time he felt awake. He quit everything, Walter continued. Traveled for 10 years. Took pictures that ended up in magazines. Slept in hostels, worked odd jobs, chased light across continents. He was broke most of the time, but alive every single day. I smiled despite myself. Sounds like he figured it out. He didn't figure it out, Walter corrected softly. He lived it out. Big difference. I nodded, letting that sink in. He turned to me. You didn't drive 2 hours into the mountains because you're empty, Alex. You came because you're still curious. That means there's something left to find. For a long while, we watched the sunlight slide down the mountains, painting the valley in gold. When he finally spoke again, his tone was quieter. I've been coming here every Saturday since he died. I promised him I'd wait. Most weeks, no one comes. But I keep showing up. Because he asked me to. The way he said it wasn't desperation. It was faith. And somehow, that hit harder than any sermon I'd ever heard. When we stood to leave, the sun was dipping low, the air colder now. Walter turned to me and said, "You'll come back, won't you?" "Yeah," I said instantly. "If that's okay." He smiled, that tired but genuine smile only kind people have. "More than okay. I could use the company." We exchanged numbers old-fashioned, handwritten on a napkin, and went our separate ways. But driving home that night, I didn't feel separate at all. For the first time in years, the noise in my head was quiet. The road stretched out like a sentence finally leading somewhere. Maybe this was what Michael meant by connection. Maybe curiosity wasn't a flaw, it was a compass. The next Saturday, I went back. Then the one after that. And the one after that. It became a ritual. Not something we planned, just something that was. Every week, Walter was there, same flannel jacket, same thermos of coffee, same gentle nod when he saw me pull up. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. The silence between us stopped being awkward. It started feeling like understanding. He told me more about Michael, his adventures, his stubborn optimism, the way he believed life was supposed to be explored, not endured. He used to say, Walter recalled, "If you're not curious, you're not really alive." I thought it was just one of his poetic moods. Now, I think he was right. I told him about my job, about how the thought of answering one more angry call made me sick. He listened quietly, then said, "Then stop doing it." I blinked. "Just like that?" He smiled. "Why not? You already know it's killing you. What's left to lose?" That night, those words followed me home. By Monday, I'd written my resignation email. I didn't even have a plan. Just a feeling that if I stayed, I'd disappear completely. I got a job at a small local bookstore 2 weeks later. Less money, more peace. The kind of peace that didn't feel empty. That's where I met Maya. She came in one afternoon, scanning the shelves for a photography book I'd just finished reading. "That's a fantastic one," I said. "It'll change the way you see shadows." She looked up, curious. "You a photographer?" "Trying to be," I said. "Mostly just trying to see." She smiled, that slow, knowing kind of smile. "That's the hard part." We talked for a while about books, art, the difference between creating and simply existing. Before she left, she asked, "Any good spots around here for practicing landscape shots?" I hesitated, thinking of the overlook. "Maybe," I said. "But it's kind of sacred." She laughed. "Sacred's fine. Just promise to show me someday." Over the next few weeks, she came back often. Sometimes to buy books, sometimes just to talk. And somehow, those talks started feeling like breaths of fresh air in the middle of my stale routine. By the fourth visit, she handed me a small film camera. "Old school," she said. "I found it in a thrift shop. Thought you'd appreciate it." I did. More than I could say. Saturdays with Walter continued too. We'd talk about Michael's photos, about light and timing, about the strange peace that comes from really seeing something for the first time. He encouraged me to take a photography class. "Don't worry about being good," he said. Just start. Curiosity will handle the rest. So I did. A community college class. Beginner level. Nothing fancy. But I loved it. The technical stuff frustrated me: aperture, shutter speed, ISO, but the act of looking. That was something else. For years, I'd been walking through life like a ghost. Now, suddenly, everything glowed. A broken streetlight. Steam rising from a sewer grate. A stranger laughing into their phone. All of it had meaning. I started showing Walter my photos. He'd look at them with the same careful attention people give to newborns. "You're learning to see," he said. "That's rarer than learning to shoot." One evening, as the sun began to set, Walter said, "You know, I think this was what Michael wanted. For someone to find me, not because I was lost, but because I had something left to give." I smiled. Guess I was the lucky one to get the coordinates. He chuckled softly. "There are no accidents, Alex. Just invitations." We sat there, watching the sky shift from gold to crimson. And for the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't thinking about what I didn't have. I was thinking about what I'd found. That night, I drove home and picked up the film camera Maya had given me. I took a picture of my apartment window, the city lights reflecting off the glass, my faint reflection in the corner. It wasn't a great shot. But it felt true. And maybe that's what mattered most. Because sometimes, the picture doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. Saturdays stopped feeling like weekends, they became small pilgrimages. Every trip up that twisting road felt lighter, the way air feels just before sunrise. I'd pull into the gravel lot, see Walter sitting on the bench, and know exactly why I was there. He'd already have 2 paper cups of coffee. "You're late," he'd tease. "Traffic," I'd lie. We'd sit, sip, watch. The silence had changed, no longer an absence of words but the presence of peace. Sometimes he told me stories about his youth, about driving cross-country with a map and a broken radio. "Back then, you had to get lost on purpose," he said once. "Now everyone's too scared of detours." I smiled. "Guess I took a digital one." He chuckled. "And look where it led you." That fall, the trees turned copper. I'd bring my camera every week, practicing shots of the same scene in new light. Walter joked that I was trying to outdo the sky. "You can't improve on this," he said, waving toward the horizon. "Maybe not," I answered, "but I can learn from it." Maya started joining me on Sundays. She had this way of seeing everything as potential art: cracks in asphalt, reflections in puddles, the way fog swallowed the trees at dawn. "You two should meet," I told Walter. "She sees the world the way Michael did." When she finally came, Walter lit up. "Another wanderer," he said. They bonded instantly, trading camera settings like recipes. Watching them talk felt like watching 2 generations handshake across time. Later, Maya whispered to me, "He's incredible. It's like he's part of the mountain." "He kind of is," I said. One Saturday in late November, I found Walter standing instead of sitting. The wind was sharp, cutting across the ridge. He looked tired but content. "Winter's coming early," he said. "You okay?" He smiled. "Old bones, young memories. They argue sometimes." We sat anyway, the cold biting through our jackets. "I've been thinking," he said after a while. "You know that letter Michael left? He wanted it to remind someone that life isn't about perfect timing." I remember. "Well, he was right. You showed up exactly when I needed you. Don't ever doubt the timing of things." I nodded, unable to answer. Some truths are too big for words. When I dropped him off that evening, he patted my shoulder. "Next week, same time?" "Always." At work, the bookstore started feeling like a heartbeat instead of a cage. I organized weekend photo displays. Customers loved them. People lingered, asking questions about composition, color, curiosity. One afternoon, Maya pointed to one of my prints, a quiet sunrise over the overlook. "That one's different," she said. "You can feel it breathing." "It's the first picture that ever felt alive to me," I admitted. "Maybe because you were alive when you took it," she said. I didn't have an answer, only gratitude. When spring came, Walter looked stronger again. We drove together sometimes. He'd insist on paying for gas, I'd insist on ignoring him. He taught me how to read light, how to wait for it instead of chasing it. "Photography," he said, "is just a polite form of patience." He was right. One bright April morning, Walter handed me a small, beat-up photo album. "Michael's first camera," he said. "And these his earliest shots. He'd want you to have them." I opened the album carefully. The pictures weren't perfect blurred horizons, overexposed skies, but there was something raw, almost holy, about them. "They're beautiful," I whispered. Walter smiled. "He would have liked you. Same kind of restless spirit." I shook my head. "I'm not restless. Just waking up." He nodded. "That's the same thing, son." We spent that day talking about everything and nothing about food, books, mistakes. At one point, Walter said, "Funny, isn't it? You bought a car for convenience and ended up finding purpose." I laughed. "I guess the universe has better navigation than we do." By summer, we had developed a quiet rhythm. Saturday meant coffee, the overlook, long pauses, and longer stories. Sometimes Maya came with us. Sometimes she sent a new recipe or a note that said, "Take care of my favorite old man." Walter always smiled when he read those. "She's good for you," he said. "And for me." One evening, I arrived early. The air smelled of pine and coming rain. Walter was already there, his camera around his neck. "Thought I'd take one last photo," he said. "Of us." I set the timer, ran to sit beside him, and the shutter clicked just as lightning flashed behind the clouds. The photo came out later that night, two silhouettes against a stormlit sky. I framed it. It still hangs in my living room. A month later, Walter called me in the middle of a weekday. "You busy?" "Always," I said. "What's up?" "Bring your camera. The mountain's wearing her best dress today." I laughed. "On my way." When I got there, the air was warm and golden. Walter stood by the railing, watching the horizon. He didn't speak for a while. Then quietly, "You know, Alex, for a long time I thought I was waiting for someone to replace Michael. But that's not it. I was waiting to remember what it felt like to care again." He looked at me. "You gave me that." I swallowed hard. "You gave it to me first." He smiled, small, sincere, almost weightless. "I think that's how it works. We save each other, one curious soul at a time." We sat until the first stars came out. The world felt smaller, but in the best way, like everything finally fit. The months that followed were the gentlest of my life. I photographed constantly. The bookstore even hosted a small gallery for local artists. Walter's portrait, him gazing at the sunset, became the centerpiece. People asked about the man in the picture. I always said the same thing. He's the reason I learned to see. On the anniversary of our first meeting, I printed one of my favorite shots and drove to the overlook alone. The bench was empty, but it didn't feel lonely. I placed the photo there, Walter and me, side by side, and whispered, "Thank you." The wind lifted slightly, brushing against my face like an old friend's hand. Maybe it was just weather. Maybe not. I sat for a while, camera on my lap, watching the valley melt into dusk. For once, I didn't reach for a picture. Some moments are meant to be kept, not captured. That night, I wrote in my journal. Maybe meaning isn't something we chase. Maybe it's what finds us when we're brave enough to follow our curiosity. I thought I was buying a car. Turns out, I was buying a second chance. I closed the notebook, looked out my window, and smiled. Somewhere out there, another road waited. And maybe, just maybe, someone else would follow a saved GPS address and find their own kind of home. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If these words touched you, if they stirred something in you or made you reflect on your own journey, I ask only 3 small things. Like the video so others can find it. Leave a comment, share your story, or simply tell me what struck you the hardest. Subscribe because more stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what's ahead.